Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I have nowhere to go.
More devastation. Dozens of homes are feared lost in the White Rock Lake wildfire. Also,
what the hell can we do, because we are gonna die here.
Oh no, yeah.
Pleading for help. Afghan interpreters who helped Canadian forces beg for assistance as the Taliban retakes control. And
for us to even begin to talk about closure, everything that has happened to our people needs to be acknowledged.
Anger, sorrow, and hope. The reckonings at BC's 22 Indian residential school sites in our new series, Beyond Kamloops. Good evening, thanks for joining us. People forced out of their homes by wildfires in the Okanagan received some heartbreaking news today. An estimated 80 homes have been destroyed by the White Rock Lake fire. The CBC's Brady Strachan has more from those who had to flee.
This is as close as residents can get to the fire ground. They've been turning up here all day, hoping for a glimpse of what's left. Jerome Wochuk says his cottage is still standing, but the flames got close.
We got really lucky. The flames didn't cross the road, and they continued. They took off to the northwest.
Father and son Doug and Travis Ferris have been trying since yesterday to check on their property.
Came up here, tried to have a look in, but it was so smoky. Couldn't get any closer than this, and we couldn't even see the houses for smoke.
Smoke from the White Rock Lake fire still simmers on the hill behind. The fire is still classified as out of control. Wendy Underhill has been ordered to leave the area twice in the past 2 weeks. The stress is taking its toll.
I had a meltdown yesterday. Total meltdown. I'm just tired.
Today, emergency officials reached out to residents who lost their homes. At the roadblock, some are angry at Premier John Horgan over his summer vacation in the Maritimes.
Or what about our Premier? He's on frickin' holidays. Like, he should be here, shouldn't he? Right? This is a disaster. It's a big one.
Meanwhile, fire crews from across the province have come to battle a fire that has grown to several hundred square kilometers and is burning out of control. Fire officials say the cooler weather and rains over the past few days have given crews a much-needed reprieve. However, they are expecting a return to warmer temperatures and gusting winds, which they say could lead to the kind of aggressive fire behavior that has been so destructive here. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Vernon, British Columbia.
The BC government is extending the provincial state of emergency for at least another 2 weeks. But tonight there is some better news. Some of those wildfire evacuation orders and alerts are being lifted. Plus, showers and cooler temperatures have given fire crews in the interior a brief but very welcome reprieve. Our Tanya Fletcher joins us live with more on that. Tanya, how much of a difference has the weather made?
Well, Mother Nature has certainly offered a break after days of intense and unpredictable fire behavior. The situation certainly got worse before it got better. Those significant winds on the weekend really whipped up rapid growth. But thankfully, the weather turned right when it was needed most.
Fortunately, the rain we've received over the last 24 hours has calmed the fire behavior. This reprieve is welcome and allows our teams on the ground to make progress on their objectives. We're expecting more rain today.
But as you heard Brady mention, the impacts might be short-lived because that rain really only scratched the surface. All of that fire fuel will dry out in a matter of days, and deeper layers in the ground are still bone dry. But crews are using the time right now to reinforce fire breaks and beat back the flames where they can. More precipitation and cooler temperatures are in the forecast in the coming days. Yes, that would help even more as long as the winds remain calm. Now, there is some other good news too. Most of the residents threatened by the Mount Law fire have been given the all clear to return home. This is more than 400 properties in West Kelowna's Upper Glen Rosa neighborhood. They were evacuated late Sunday. Officials say only one structure saw major damage there. 17 properties will remain under an evacuation order. Another 477 have moved to an alert only. Now, if you are ordered to leave, police are asking you to do something very important before you go.
If you could ensure that you post a note in a very visible location on your property indicating that you have evacuated, the date that you did evacuate, where you're planning to be, and a contact number that you can be reached at. And what that does, that allows our officers or whomever is making that evacuation notification to that property, that they don't have to go looking for those people.
And we should mention as well, the city of Kamloops has rescinded the evacuation alert that was in place for the western part of the city due to the Tremont Creek fire.
That is some better news. Tanya, some better news as well for drivers on some of our biggest highways.
Yeah, that's right, Dan. The Coquihalla is open again after a day-long closure between Hope and Merritt after 2 wildfires emerged there. It's especially good news for smaller towns on the routes where traffic was diverted to. The mayor of Princeton was particularly frustrated with the impact on his community.
I am absolutely disgusted that we still don't have any support from the province on traffic control. I'll turn the camera around. This traffic line goes a few kilometers back up the road, and we've been asking for help since yesterday, and we still don't have anybody helping us. This is a joke.
Now, as that route reopens, talking about the Coquihalla there, another has closed. This is near Lytton, a town already decimated by wildfire. Now a mudslide has cut off Highway 1. Look at these pictures. TransCanada there was shut down last night between Lytton and just south of Cache Creek. It's still closed in both directions, and there's no estimated time of reopening. And we should also note about Highway 3 further south. It's seeing heavy congestion as one of the detour routes, as you heard the mayor there mention, and much of it is single-lane traffic. So officials overall are repeating the reminder to tourists, if you don't have to be traveling through these areas, don't.
All
Dan?
right. Tanya Fletcher joining us live. Thanks very much. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. Joe, many people thankful for that rain across our province. What's next?
Yeah, that's the big question, as we heard from Tanya. Short-term good news, followed by a bit of a warm-up, but we do have some rain and cooler temperatures in the long-range forecast. So really a 3-part story. Our exiting cold front, leaving behind some cooler temperatures for the interior, a couple of warm and dry days, and then some more rain at the back end. I want to show you the fire danger rating map. This can fluctuate so quickly, but notice the greens across parts of the southern interior. That's low, so fires aren't spreading as quickly, although notice in the southern Okanagan, still pockets of high where we didn't get the rain, and still a lot of red across the province. I want to show you the current temperatures. These are the lowest that we've seen for afternoon highs in weeks. 17 for Vernon, Kelowna struggling to get to 18. We actually had snow in parts of the Kootenays earlier today. So Elkford getting a few centimeters of snow behind that cold front that's still spinning just south of the Alberta-BC border. And you can still see tonight getting some gusty winds. So we're not done with the winds yet, but as that low sinks to the south, we're going to get a calmer high pressure build in for Wednesday, Thursday. That's for the south coast and the interior. So winds should be calmer, temperatures shouldn't skyrocket, but smoke likely back in full force. And we still have those special weather statements in place for the interior that have been there since June. Dan, I'll take you to the rain that I'm looking at for the end of the week. And that goes for everyone coming up a little later on in the show.
Okay, thanks very much, Joe.
You're welcome.
To Afghanistan now, where the Taliban appears to be trying to reframe its image in the eyes of the world. But memory runs deep for those who've experienced its brutal rule firsthand. As Carolyn Dunn explains, the U.S. and its allies are not letting their guards down.
As the Taliban made its presence known at checkpoints in the capital, its leaders held its first news conference since taking control of Kabul. Through a translator, the Taliban spokesperson tried to assuage fears that are rippling through the country.
That we are assuring the safety of all those who have worked with the United States and allied forces, whether as interpreters or any other field that they've worked with them.
Difficult to take at face value given the recent haunting images of so many desperately trying to escape Afghanistan and the history of the Taliban's brutality. So the airport has reopened, a mass evacuation of foreign nationals continues, and of course planes packed with Afghan citizens fleeing their country.
Yesterday, the U.S. military footprint in Afghanistan started at about roughly 2,500. And by the end of today, there will be more than approximately 4,000 troops on the ground in Kabul.
At least 9 planes of Afghan refugees and Canadian diplomats and soldiers have arrived in Canada so far. For the millions left behind, there's a particular concern for the fate of women and girls. Again, the Taliban is projecting a kinder, gentler approach to the world.
Women will be afforded all their rights, whether it is in work or other activities, because women are a key part of society. And we are guaranteeing all their rights within the limits of Islam.
Again, its history of oppression and violence against women is sowing seeds of doubt that the Taliban of today will be any different than the Taliban that terrorized its own people for years. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Washington.
And as the Canadian government continues to try to evacuate desperate Afghans, interpreters in that country and in Canada continue to speak up. They say they put their lives in danger to help Canadian forces. Zara Premji shows us Canada must speed up its rescue efforts.
Please help us, take us out of Afghanistan, or if you don't get us out of Afghanistan, we are gonna die.
Fear cuts through the voice of an Afghan interpreter who we are calling Khan for his safety.
What the hell can we do? Because we are gonna die here.
The 28-year-old worked for the Canadian military operations in Afghanistan. He's now trapped there with his family, unable to leave home, running out of food, wondering whether he'll die at the hands of hunger or the Taliban first. Afghan interpreters were critical to Canada's military in Afghanistan, and as aides to Canadians, their need to flee has become even more desperate.
The Canadian government that we have helped you when you came to Afghanistan, we have left our houses for you, we have left our families for them.
We received a letter from the Taliban saying, oh, you are safe now, but don't worry, we will kill you after this.
Yusuf Abdul Khalik says he was an interpreter for the Canadian Armed Forces in 2010 and 2011.
It was not just interpreter. We had to go in the mission, in every single mission, and we had to fight with the Canadians against the Taliban.
He made it to BC, but his family has not.
Every single interpreter family, they're suffering from the Taliban. It is just because of me, not because of them. They're not working with the government. I work with them.
The Canadian government says it will do its part and help families like Abdul Khalik's and Khan's.
We deserve that. We work with you guys. We give you blood. We fight for you.
We made commitments for supporting up to 20,000 Afghans, including direct evacuation of thousands.
We heard last night that Prime Minister Trudeau said we brought 807 people to Canada who work with us, but we know a lot of friends that they're interpreters in Afghanistan. They're still in Afghanistan. We just want to know who did you brought to Canada.
His frustrations echo over the phone all the way from Afghanistan.
We help them with the Canadian Armed Forces, with our lives, with our family lives.
And despite promises from the Taliban to keep interpreters safe,
that's not the truth.
They're now begging for a rescue in return from the country they risked their lives for. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
CBC News did ask the federal government today about the latest on its efforts to rescue Afghan interpreters. Officials say they are working on our request. Canadians continue to reckon with our country's history of Indian residential schools. This week, CBC reporter Wamish Hamilton looks into the reckoning at BC's 22 residential school sites in our new three-part series, Beyond Kamloops. Tonight, in part one, Wamish gives us a sense of how First Nations are preparing for what lies ahead.
This has been on the mind of our survivors since the discovery at Kamloops Indian Residential School.
Since the 215 unmarked graves were revealed in Kamloops, First Nations across BC have begun putting their own plans into place to investigate disappearances whispered about by survivors for more than a century.
We suffered a lot in those schools. Our people suffered, and we still suffer today for it.
According to Treaty, Lands and Resources Director Gabriel George, the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations' primary focus is supporting members of the community.
There's an expression in our language, "achiltal," which is paddling together, and that's the way we see this. That's an analogy that our elders would use for our life, that we have to paddle together, and so, you know, we're trying to keep an eye on each other as well.
Gabriel George knows that this is not the end of the journey.
It is a big step towards closure. It's not closure, but it's a big step towards closure. because I think in order for us to even begin to talk about closure, everything that has happened to our people needs to be acknowledged.
The emotions are a reflection of what is being felt by First Nations across BC. We reached out to First Nations across the province in whose territories BC's 22 residential schools were located. And here's what we heard: a range of plans and emotions, from anger to sorrow to hope.
Oh man, this is a trying time. Holy cow, it's like all the emotion that brings up, the anger, the sadness, and the whole spectrum of emotions.
Don Svanvik of the Namgis First Nation on northern Vancouver Island says that this difficult issue is also a teachable moment.
It's surprising how little that a lot of the general public knows about residential school. I think that can be a positive step for people knowing the truth.
Chief Councillor Willie Sellers of the Williams Lake First Nation knows that finding bodies is only the first challenge.
This is just the investigation portion of the process. I mean, if we start finding, graves, what do we do? Do we exhume or excavate those findings? I mean, there's a lot of, unanswered questions if we start finding grave sites.
Chief Councillor Greg Louie of the Ahousaht First Nation is clear. They plan to repatriate their loved ones from residential schools abroad.
We've had our members attend residential school outside of our territory. So, if we have any Ahousaht members that didn't make it home from those areas, we definitely probably will have a repatriation process.
When it comes to bodies found on their own territory, Louis recognizes that there may be a range of perspectives.
If we find out who some of these remains belong to, what family, we would consult with the family first. And if they would like a repatriation process, and we'll follow their lead. If they don't, then we'll also follow their lead, and we'll respect their decisions.
Back in North Vancouver, the St. Paul's Indian Residential School once tried exterminating culture and tradition in Indigenous children. But that culture and tradition survived, and today it guides the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people as they navigate this difficult time.
That announcement of us taking care, Hiashlimit, to watch over, to take care of those remains until they could be connected with their families. That's an important concept in our spirituality, of the spirit going home to its ancestors, the spirit going home to their family. And I think that this awakening of those ones that were buried in the ground in unmarked graves is a chance for us to awaken the strength of our people even more.
Wamish Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Thank you.
News like this can be traumatic. Crisis lines are offering support, though. The 24-hour Indian Residential School Survivors Society can be reached at the number there, 1-866-925-4419. And the CUIS crisis line is also available. That information is also available on our website, cbc.ca/BC. 1 year has now passed since the start of protests against the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion in Burnaby. And as Michelle Gomez reports, activists are not stopping anytime soon.
It started just over a year ago. Tim Tuccaro, a professor at SFU, ascended into the trees of the Brunette River Conservation Area. Tim and other activists have remained camping in the forest ever since.
This is one of the last remaining parts of the pipeline route in Burnaby that has not been logged. And we're here protecting these trees and the creek.
This is the treehouse they have built. The protesters make sure at least one person is inside at all times. Food, water, and other supplies are delivered using a system of pulleys.
We have batteries, we even have a fan up there for the hot weather.
Maureen Curran is the Green Party candidate for Burnaby South. She's running against incumbent and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh in this summer's federal election. Curran joined the treetop protest last summer. She says that living among the branches has been surprisingly peaceful.
The birds come to visit. I got to watch a hawk hunt for its dinner. It really changes your perspective.
Trans Mountain said in a statement to CBC that the expansion project will require the removal of a total of 1,275 trees. This includes an additional 86 trees that they requested permits for in early August. After the City of Burnaby refused to issue these permits, Trans Mountain has gone once again to the Canadian Energy Regulator for permission, requesting the approval by November 1st.
Every day we're able to delay construction is a good day.
We have a vaccine that can get rid of COVID. There is no vaccine for climate change. We have to actually change how we behave.
Trans Mountain said they anticipate the completion of the project by December 2022. They did not respond when asked how many trees have been cut so far. Michelle Gomez, CBC News, Vancouver.
We have some sad news in BC's fight against COVID-19. 2 months ago, we told you the story of Jeremy Johnson, a 44-year-old man in ICU fighting for his life at Royal Columbian Hospital. We've now been told that Jeremy died last Friday. He'd been intubated since the end of April. A father of two, his wife Rika told us he was healthy before being diagnosed with COVID-19 last April, but his health rapidly declined after he was also diagnosed with pneumonia. His oxygen levels dropped and he was brought into the hospital ICU. He no longer had COVID when we spoke with him, but kidney failure, among other ailments, kept him in intensive care until he died. We want to thank his wife Rika and Jeremy's family for letting us share his story, and we share with them our best wishes. As vaccination rates in BC continue to plateau, the province's rolling average has increased for the 33rd straight day. We've now had 501 new confirmed cases of COVID in the past 24 hours. Interior Health has trended for the better, however. For the first time since last month, the number of cases in that region is lower than the rest of BC, still though at 265, and hospitalizations have gone up to 111. And so have the number of people in intensive care at 51. Sadly, the province reported one more death today. We've now lost 1,781 people to COVID-19. In just a few weeks, kids are heading back to class, and with kids under 12 remaining unvaccinated, many parents have mixed feelings about sending their children back to socialize with their classmates. We spoke to parents and kids in Surrey about how they feel heading into the school year.
It's good to see them get back into school and talk with people and connect with their friends, but still a little worried though too about Delta variant.
Like, it's not safe to go to school sometimes because COVID is kind of getting worse in the moment. So
I always feel like, oh, if I just keep her home, I feel safe. But I think we would both like it to go back to how it was, if possible.
Well, it's just a whole building packed full of unvaccinated kids, so transmission possibility is higher there, I guess.
To other news now, Victoria police are looking for a suspect and witnesses to a random assault on a 5-year-old boy late yesterday morning. Police say a woman and her 3 children were walking downtown when another woman hit the boy in the face. The mom and the kids quickly left the area and called police. The boys suffered non-life-threatening injuries. Police say it was his birthday, too. The suspect is said to be a white woman between 30 and 40 years old with shoulder-length reddish-brown hair. She's about 5 feet 6 inches tall with a slim build. She was wearing light-colored blue jeans. Police say she appeared to be under the influence of drugs. Mungwon Joe's lawyers wrapped their case just a short time ago. They spent the day arguing the U.S. government's accusations of fraud against her are simply invalid. The Huawei CEO's lawyers told court the losses suffered by the victim of Mung's alleged fraud have never been quantified. They say fraud charges require at least some concrete, quantifiable measure of what's at stake. The Crown will wrap its arguments tomorrow, bringing the case to a close within a few days. She's facing extradition to the United States. The widow of a murder victim is spearheading a referendum over the future of policing in Surrey.
I can speak out and try to make a difference so this doesn't happen to someone else. And the people of Surrey deserve to have a voice in this. They deserve to have the facts, and they deserve to make an informed decision.
Darlene Bennett's husband was shot and killed in their Surrey home in 2018. RCMP believe it was mistaken identity, and his case remains open. Surrey Police Vote Initiative is trying to get 10% of Surrey voters to sign in the next 90 days. The hope is to compel the province to allow a vote and keep the RCMP in Surrey. The official signature collection period set by Elections BC runs until November 15th. Ferry service is set to continue uninterrupted to remote towns along Vancouver Island's west coast, not long after the boat's operators said its last sailing was just a few weeks away. Lady Rose Marine Services said it was packing up shop after well over a year of pandemic-related financial trouble. That worried the communities that depend on that ferry for transportation and cargo hauling, including the Huu-ay-aht First Nation. But a local business owner has agreed to purchase Lady Rose and keep the service going. Full details are expected when the sale is finalized later this week. And a reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. That free app is also where you can find other CBC programs. CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Party leaders were out on the campaign trail again today as the first week of the election rolls on. Find out what they're pledging next. Thank you for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. Horses are now allowed on certain parts of the Confederation Trail. Riders can now use the trail in rural areas as part of a pilot project running until November. We caught up with a few dozen people who were hot to trot on the trail.
What brings us out today is to have the honor of being one of the first riders on the Confederation Trail. We were asked by Sylvia, who has been spearheading the project of riding on the Confederation Trails, and there are 3 areas that have opened up, and we've decided that we're going to head out to O'Leary. My husband's family is from out that way, so we were hoping to see a few friends and family come out and greet us as well.
Well, I came here with my horse for the first time in 2012. I mean, I've been coming since I was, before I can remember. The first time I had the horse here was back then, and I was surprised at the absence of publicly accessible trails. You can ride on private land and you can ride on clay roads, but an actual managed trail system wasn't something that was available. And like Angelina, I come from a history of shared trails. British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. I've ridden on shared trails all across the country in just about every province. And rail trails like the Confederation Trail work very, very well.
No, it was great. We actually didn't even have to ride on the dirt part of the Confederation Trail. The trail's wide enough that we all rode on the grass part. We did have a couple horses that did go poo, so we brought our dustpan and cleaned off all the poo, and we didn't meet any bicycles, no strollers. Actually, we didn't meet anyone except for yourself.
The footing is safe, you feel safe all the time. There's not a lot of traffic. So I think that's the big thing, is that now we have a place where I don't have to saddle up my horse and then have an anxiety attack thinking how many trailers are going to be on the road, how many tourists are going to be on the road, how many people are going to honk and try to wave and be nice but don't realize that these are animals.
Stick around after the break. We'll have more on the federal election and plenty of other news across this very large country. Stick around. It is day 3 of the federal election campaign, and one of the issues many parents are paying close attention to is the cost of childcare. Evan Dyer shows us how the 2 main parties are taking very different approaches.
Daycare is lots of fun. Of course, they don't have to pay for it.
When you have a family of 3 children, there's a few discounts, but really you're looking at $2,400 a month, which is more than most mortgages.
The Trudeau government put $10 a day daycare in its last budget. Since then, his government has been making deals with provinces that want in, most recently Quebec, which will get federal dollars to finance its existing system.
This is real change you can count on. In real terms, it means cutting fees in half by the end of next year. $10 a day childcare in 5 years or less.
We're going to help them immediately. Our plan comes into effect when we're government, not 5 or 6 years from now. We're helping all families.
Conservatives and New Democrats say Canadian voters have heard such promises too many times before. The Conservatives are promising tax credits for parents with bigger credits for lower income earners.
We're going to help all families, and lower income families will have 75% of the costs covered. So we're going to empower families to make their decisions, and we're going to support all families immediately.
Two different views of how to emerge from a pandemic. One would put more money in people's pockets, but wouldn't reduce costs or create new spaces. The other would reduce costs and might create more spaces, but no tax credits. Some economists, though, say cheaper daycare would mean more women can enter the workforce.
When they work more, they pay more taxes. For every $100 Quebec has sunk into subsidized childcare, they have received $108 back in new personal income taxes.
But subsidies don't automatically translate into spaces. In Quebec, where subsidized daycare has existed for years, there are currently 50,000 kids on wait lists, and the number of spaces has been shrinking, not growing. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Chelsea, Quebec.
Aaron O'Toole, meanwhile, brought his virtual campaign to Toronto today. No door knocking or whistle stops for the Conservative leader just yet. As the CBC's Hannah Thibodeau reports, O'Toole believes he can reach more voters this way.
Aaron O'Toole left his virtual hotel studio in Ottawa to campaign in 2 hotels in the Toronto area. Now, while other leaders have been out in public spaces, O'Toole has had little face-to-face interaction with everyday voters. He says his telephone town halls allow him to connect with more people.
Well, in the last few days, we've spoken to over 50,000 Canadians directly. I've taken their questions directly, many of whom we've never met before.
The Conservatives will hold rallies with just party faithful, like the ones tonight. And O'Toole and his team feel confident campaigning like this in a pandemic is a better way to connect with all voters.
I'm Olivia Stefanovich with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh in Vancouver. Here in the Lower Mainland, he is promoting an industrial strategy to bolster domestic manufacturing.
For years and years, we've seen Liberals and Conservatives allow manufacturing to be eroded to the point that we were not producing some of the most important equipment that we need in our own country. We want to stop that trend.
Oh boy, this is so good.
Singh is the first federal leader to visit British Columbia during this campaign, stopping in ridings held by the Liberals and Conservatives. An aggressive approach indicating the NDP is optimistic it can add to the 11 seats it won here 2 years ago.
In Haiti, earthquake survivors are facing incredibly difficult conditions. Downpours, landslides, and lack of medical supplies are hampering relief efforts following last weekend's 7.2 magnitude earthquake. Ellen Morrow toured one of the cities hardest hit by the destruction.
Haiti's pain echoes in the agonized scream of this little boy. He's had this gaping open wound on his wrist for 3 days as overwhelmed doctors struggle to help.
He needs to go to the OR, so we're just trying to get the dressing on so we can get the...
Do you have any pain meds?
This is one of the hospitals trying to do its best to treat the injured in the disaster zone. You can see how overwhelmed it is. There are still people who are waiting to get in, waiting to get treatment. You can see this woman right here relying on these people to help her out of a wheelchair to get the treatment that she needs inside. But what we're being told is that this hospital doesn't have all the supplies it needs to help these people who so desperately need care.
Some, including the elderly, languish on stretchers outside. This man's leg was injured as he desperately fled his house before it collapsed. He tells us that he can't get medicine even as he sits outside the hospital. Some of the seriously injured are transferred by helicopter an hour away to the capital, Port-au-Prince. But here, too, hospitals are stretched. This Canadian aid worker is helping triage the wounded.
We're reaching capacity in a lot of the hospitals that we'd normally transport to. So we're really trying to get some more equipment out to the hospitals that are in the south so we can better equip them so they can stabilize and keep the patients down there.
Humanitarian agencies are working with the U.S. Coast Guard to get aid to the disaster zone. Much of it is being taken in by air, with the risk of gang warfare on the main road from Port-au-Prince only worsening already complicated logistics. Adding to the misery, Tropical Depression Grace brought torrential rain last night, as thousands are forced to now live outside. Today, cleanup efforts are ongoing as hope quickly dims that any more survivors will be found. What remains is trauma. This man's home was spared, but he fears it still might collapse in an aftershock. He tells us he's always thinking about the earth shaking and that all the homes around his have been destroyed. So much suffering for a people who've already suffered so much. A tragedy, its true toll still yet unknown.
Ellen Morrow reporting. The evolving situation in Afghanistan has many former soldiers questioning how it came to be like this. Coming up, we speak with a retired corporal who served for Canada there. Stick around.
This lumberyard sells only to building contractors, and it's here they really feel the pinch. Almost half the workers have been laid off, close to $1 million of equipment is idle, and business is down 60%.
I think that anybody who's been offered $4 an hour, I believe it's over 2 years, is asinine if they don't take it. Particularly when you look around and there's seems like about 1 million people wait to take those jobs.
Dick Alexander says that the union membership should be allowed to vote on the offer. On the picket line, they say it would be turned down anyway.
When the CLRA comes up with $2 an hour retroactive, we'll sign.
If we sign for anything less, that's like giving our company $1,100 bonus for allowing us to work.
It's not only the lumber yards and the concrete plants which are being caught in the middle of this dispute. Big projects worth $3 billion are now almost completely stopped throughout the province. The union says the contractors had planned for a 30% increase in wages over the next 2 years. Yet, they are offering only 20%. This afternoon, the unions announced they were applying for mediation. Because of all the big projects, the province was supposed to weather these difficult times more easily. This dispute could be disastrous for the economy if it lasts much longer. Georges Tremel, CBC News, Vancouver.
This is the closest most people ever get to the mighty Mount Robson, a parking lot on the Yellowhead Highway. If you've got the money, you can helicopter in for a closer look at the nearly 4,000-meter King of the Rockies. And if you're willing to spend 3 days with 30 pounds on your back and heavy boots on your feet, and if the weather cooperates, then it's possible to climb to the top of Robson. One of the prerequisites is high-energy food. This international party, its members come from France, Switzerland, and Canada, is making dinner at an overnight camp at 2,600 meters. The 60-million-year-old dome of ice and rock that is Robson has been basking in the sun this August of 1981. That's caused an extraordinary runoff of water. It's also caused lots of avalanches, which is one reason why climbing days on Robson start very early in the morning. When a person gets to the top of Robson, it's impossible to avoid the feeling that you're on top of the world, at least on top of this part of the world. Everywhere you look, you're surrounded by other mountains, and they're all shorter than Robson. There's time at the summit for picture taking and for a few moments of silence. Many people have died trying to reach this spot on Earth. A member of the original climbing party wrote in his logbook in 1909, "There are mountains and there are mountains, and then there is Mount Robson." Russ Patrick, CBC News, on Mount Robson in British Columbia.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight for you on CBC Vancouver News.
I have nowhere to go.
Another very difficult day for people whose lives have been upended by wildfires. An estimated 80 homes have been destroyed by the White Rock Lake fire in the BC interior. The provincial state of emergency has been extended, but rain is helping in some places.
Please help us, take us out of Afghanistan, or if you don't get us out of Afghanistan, we are gonna die.
Not just my family, every single interpreter family, they're suffering from the Taliban.
Interpreters who helped Canadian forces in Afghanistan are pleading for rescue across the world. Well, Canada has pledged to help them out. They say Ottawa must move faster to save them from the Taliban as it retakes control of that country. They say it's the least Canada could do after they risked their lives.
And I think that this awakening of those ones that were buried in the ground in unmarked graves is a chance for us to awaken the strength of our people even more.
And as Canadians reckon with our dark history of residential schools, CBC reporter Wamish Hamilton is looking into what is happening in BC's 22 residential school sites. In part one of our new series, Beyond Kamloops, Hamilton is giving us a sense of how First Nations are preparing for next steps. The Taliban retakeover of Afghanistan has many people, including former soldiers, questioning how this happened. Joining us now is someone who served in Afghanistan for Canada, Maurice Bartlett, a retired corporal with Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. He was deployed to Masamgar as part of Operation Athena. Maurice, first of all, what is going through your mind as you see and hear the Taliban retake control of Afghanistan?
Well, firstly, it's really sad. I have been watching over social media. I've been watching my friends name places as they fall, and it's really disheartening. We kind of all knew that that the Taliban retaking Afghanistan was an inevitable eventuality, but it's just really sad to have to watch it happen.
When you talk about an inevitability, when you look back on your time there, what impact do you think that had? Was that in your mind when you were there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Canada went over in a spirit, in my opinion, of course, Canada went over in a spirit, the same spirit of peacekeeping that we maintained for decades. And we went there just to try to help on a somewhat individualized basis. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that as far as we've been able to.
As we mentioned, we're deployed in Masamgar. Can you give us a sense of the people that you were there to help and to protect and what you're thinking about for them right now?
Well, I think their new life under the Taliban is probably going to be very difficult. It's going to be a significant step down in quality of life for a lot of people, but I think many of the locals will feel that it's justified for ideological reasons, and I expect it's going to be. I expect there's going to be a lot of problems for them ahead.
Do you have any particular concern, Maurice, about women and girls who suffered under the brutal regime, particularly the first Taliban government from 1996 to 2001?
The difficulties that are going to be faced by the Afghan people ahead are different for men and for women and girls. They're going to face a huge step back. They're going to have to be covered all the time. Again, they're probably going to be barred from having an education again. Their freedoms will be significantly curtailed. They're much more curtailed than we would have in the West, and it's going to be a very difficult situation for them.
To that end, what do you make of the international response, particularly the call for countries, be it Canada, the United States, to take in a lot more Afghan refugees, people fleeing the country? We've all seen the images from the airport.
Well, I will say Canada, we owe a specific debt to the interpreters that worked with us, but also in that same spirit of peacekeeping and trying to help the world, I think everybody around the world has a responsibility to try and help where they can, and that is going to include taking in some refugees. I think we should be working to do at least some of that.
Morris Bartlett, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
COVID-19 booster shots may soon be available in the United States. Find out who would be up for a shot after the break. And at 6:44, a live pullback look at the North Shore and the Port of Vancouver. The clouds made for some room for sunshine today, at least at the end. The rain and the smoke, though, could be coming back. Joe will have that in your full provincial forecast. Stick around.
Over the 15 years of my company, Gahawi Dance Theatre, it's been a challenge to figure out, the identity of the company and what we represent. Even to this very day, I have that question of, am I Santee the artist, or am I a Mohawk artist? And how do I frame that, or how does society see my work and frame me? Santee Smith, Dagalunyakwa, Nyungyats, Gungwaihoe, Ganyangahaga, Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, Turtle Clan. My name is Santee. I am the artistic director of Gahawi Dance Theatre. I'm an artist, director, producer, and I'm the chancellor of McMaster University. I was 11 years old and I moved from Six Nations to residence and train at the National Ballet School for 6 years. I didn't finish my last year because I decided at that time that the ballet was actually not for me. There was this, feeling of not being fulfilled in many ways, and I think mostly it had to do with identity. It wasn't really about the actual dance. It was wanting to connect to home and missing home. For me, dance is now very much rooted to the land and exploring my identity, my Haudenosaunee roots and foundation, and telling stories that were not told in mainstream theater and dance. The dance I'm going to share today is an excerpt from my original premiere production of Gahawi, and that was my first major work. And it's infused with many different concepts from Haudenosaunee beliefs, and it was a real labor of love because it was inspired by the actual death of my grandmother, Rita Weiss, and the birth of my daughter, Samaya Smith. So it was tied into that process, but also wanting to share the fact that Haudenosaunee culture honors women, that there are some really powerful, strong ways of living in the world that are not necessarily patriarchal. Well, I think it's really important that there's more recognition and awareness for companies who are offering new ways of working. Ballet has a long history of being touted as, the pinnacle of artistic practice and expression. And I think there's a whole host of other forms, other influences, other original dances from this land that we call Canada that are really important to highlight.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with a provincial weather forecast. Joe, you hinted at it earlier, there's a chance we could have wildfire smoke back here on the coast.
It's true, Dan. Probably not as widespread and a long duration of event as we saw last week, but the setup is right. And some of our smoke forecast models are showing the potential for high level smoke to move in tomorrow and then perhaps some mixing for Thursday. So watch out for that haze. We may see some special weather statements. It just depends on how much mixing we get down to lower levels. But high pressure is locking things in, and we've got a bit of an east to west flow over the next couple of days. Let me show you the temperatures right now. That's sort of our today's story. Cooler temperatures, clearing skies behind that cold front we talked about earlier. 21 right now at YVR. Hanging on to 19s up the Sunshine Coast. Still pretty muggy on the east side of the island, 27 for Nanaimo and a Campbell River at a 28, and a bit of a humidex for you this afternoon, and then just 19 out towards Hope. So descending cold front, as I mentioned earlier, clearing skies overnight, but still fairly gusty tomorrow morning, especially through the Kootenays. I've got the isobars on here. So those are lines of equal pressure, and the closer they are together, the windier an area will be, and you can see how tight they are through the Kootenays for tomorrow afternoon. So still looking at 40 plus kilometer per hour gusts there, but Kamloops, Kelowna, Vernon, Shuswap, more like 20 to 30 kilometers per hour as this high pressure builds in. And that's our story in through Metro Vancouver. Sunny, but helping to direct that smoke in for Wednesday and Thursday. Notice all the green, though, on the central and northern coastal sections through Prince George up towards the Peace. Rain to scattered showers for the central and northern half of the province, and we do need it. That's where fire danger remains high. It's been dry the past week, so getting some good rain there. Quick look at those temperatures again across the province over the next couple of days. Heating up Thursday and Wednesday and Thursday, I should say, but then coming back down Friday as we get that low pressure system bringing some showers back to the interior. So that's our story as well, getting a few showers on Friday. So pretty warm over the next couple of days. Nothing that will be breaking any monthly records as we have already done this month. Just above seasonal by a couple of degrees. Showers on Friday, not guaranteed, but that is coming with some cooler temperatures. Looks like we get a bit of a day's break, and then, Dan, some pretty decent rain in the forecast for Sunday. I think this is the first time all summer that I've used more than one rain icon. They are getting their workout this week, and that is good.
We appreciate it. And of course, we know that the smoke is not great, but a lot more British Columbians than just the South Coast have been living with that for months. So got to keep
I'm
this
glad
all
you
in
mentioned that.
perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, got to keep it in
Special weather
perspective.
statements still in place for them.
Indeed. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
More stringent COVID-19 vaccine programs are coming to Ontario and Quebec. Along with the vaccine passport announced last week, Quebec will impose mandatory immunizations for healthcare workers in regular contact with patients. And in Ontario, the Chief Medical Officer of Health announced several new directives, including vaccination requirements for education and health workers.
The directive will require covered organizations to implement policies that require their employees and others in these sectors to either provide a proof of full vaccination against COVID-19, provide a documented medical reason for not being vaccinated. In cases where individuals do not provide full proof of vaccination, they will be required to undergo regular testing and demonstrate continued negative results.
The province is holding its reopening plan at its current level, maintaining masking requirements and capacity limits on businesses. Ontario is also going to start offering a third COVID shot to people with weakened immune systems. Meanwhile, in the U.S., there are reports the Biden administration is looking at offering COVID booster shots to the public. The plan could start rolling out as early as next month. And as Megan Fitzpatrick reports, first boosters would be offered to older Americans, healthcare workers, and other priority populations.
Putting this plan into place does depend first on FDA authorization to give third doses of these vaccines, and that has not happened yet. Last week, the FDA did approve giving third doses to certain groups of people who are immunocompromised. Following that green light, then the expert panel of the CDC, which gives guidance on how to use vaccines, they endorsed that. And so that is now happening for certain groups, but again, not for the general population yet. The FDA has not authorized this. The vaccine manufacturers are doing clinical trials involving giving booster shots. Pfizer-BioNTech just yesterday submitted some preliminary data to the FDA for its review, and they still have more data to give them. So there are still quite a few steps yet to be taken before this booster program would be put into place by the White House. And now, if the U.S. does proceed with this plan in the next few weeks, it would be going against what the WHO is asking for. The head of the WHO a few weeks ago pleaded with higher income countries like the U.S. to hold off on implementing booster shot programs until more of the world could be vaccinated. Lower income countries struggling to get enough supply to give first doses to some of their populations.
Our recommendation remains to make sure that those who are most at risk, older populations, those with underlying conditions, and critically our health workers in all countries around the world receive that first and second dose before we do the boosters for those who don't necessarily need it right now.
Last week, when asked about a plan for booster shots for immunocompromised people, Health Canada said that the Public Health Agency of Canada is monitoring the evidence closely, and that NACI, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, again, an expert panel that gives advice and guidance on how to use vaccines, that they're looking at the data as well, and they could have some updated guidance in the weeks ahead. Megan Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Washington.
A Vancouver Island artist has given BC's flag a bit of a makeover. We'll show you more of her reimagined vision next.
Even before you get into the space, the whole idea was for the building itself to make you curious about what it was, right? And it's been working since day one. People are just like, what's going on here? It's gotten a couple of different names because people didn't know. It looked like a spaceship. They had a couple other different names for it, which is fine. I thought it was funny, because it kind of generated interest, generated conversation. But then they come a little bit closer. They see the door. It's a hand-carved eagle, which is, something that really symbolizes community. Then when you go through the doors, it's like walking into a whole other world, right? Because you see artwork everywhere. You just see the natural light in there. People always go in there and say, it smells great, the wood. It's all red cedar from BC. So it's like, it's a very nice cedar smell to it. So it's kind of hitting you on all levels, right? And that was the intention of the whole thing, is that this was going to be an experience all on its own. And that's what it's doing. So you'll see the artwork, and then once you get past the artwork, you actually go into the maker space where you'll see the artist actually making the pieces, right? And that's part of what we wanted it to be. We wanted this to be a destination for creativity. So we wanted people to come here to see the artist at work. We wanted people to be able to take something away with them, become part of that structure.
What kind of wood is that, Shane?
This here is cedar, I believe.
Cedar? My name's Jesus Pearly. I'm from the Tobic Reserve, and I make crafts like baskets and canoes, but I make more artistic stuff too, like with the birch bark containers and stuff. I guess I've been working a lot on cultural revitalization, and and this is I've taught quite a few people to make baskets, and native and non-native, and so that's basically how I've been making my living. It makes you feel like you're doing something important, and you're following in your ancestors' footsteps, When you're getting the materials, you're doing things that they did, hundreds of years ago.
I think it's really important for artists like myself, because it's difficult to get sometimes the exposure as an artist, and for it to be here and available, I think it would make it a lot easier for other artists to showcase the work that they've done. And I think too, being in your own, from your own community that's supporting the work that you do, I think it makes it easier for the artist, knowing that that support is there, that, you know, this is here for you if you need it or if you want it.
Here's an interesting and rather controversial question. Should we change BC's flag? One Kwakwaka'wakw artist has come up with an alternative aimed at starting a conversation. Lou-Anne Neal's design includes shapes and symbols pulled from her nation's culture.
The current representation of the flag doesn't carry anything within it that represents us being here and still being here. So I wanted to push the discussion more than anything. Not so much, here's how I think the flag should be changed. This was just my version of it.
Neal is hoping all British Columbians will weigh in on how we as a province ought to be represented by our flag. You can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news is right here at 11 o'clock with Tanya Fletcher after the National. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a good evening.